Well, welcome back, everybody. This man, although he's without a beard this time, he needs no introduction. It is, of course, Mr. Keith Ferry, and we've got something really special. So over a couple of episodes and then back later on in the year, we're going to do a real feature on breeding Norwich Canaries, and Keith's very kindly, I think very kindly agreed. Keith, was that right? Did you kindly agree, or did I kindly ask? One or the other?
I just like seeing you come down and having a good chat about the birds. Oh. So anytime.
Bless you.
Do a bit of film.
Bless you. He's very, very kind. We are in the middle of the breeding season in Keith's room. He has made some amendments to the room since we were last here. So there's a continuous strive for room improvements. It was fantastic last time. You'll notice the eagle-eyed amongst you that there is new cages in here, and also there is new cages or actually Keith's Norwich breeding cages, which have had a little bit of a refurb as well. So we'll have a look at those. Lots and lots in store as always. Grab yourself a cuppa, sit back and enjoy the show. So, Keith, we've been chatting a lot about the trials and tribulations of the Norwich Canary, and really, I think we'll start today sort of focusing on preparation for breeding, and then maybe move into breeding itself. So. We've talked off camera, and really the preparation starts, considerably in advance, doesn't it? Certainly with the Norwich, but with all canaries, it's not a sort of bang them in a cage in April and fingers crossed and hope for the best.
No, you're quite right there. But I mean, really, it starts this time of the year, right in the nest. I mean, a good breeding stock bird is made in the nest, and if it's been reared correctly and brought up right, they're the birds, and you're right through the season up to the breeding season. They need to have a good molt, they have to have a good diet and come through the molt well, and fed well through the winter before you even start thinking of conditioning them up for the breeding season. So that's the main thing. And for those who are buying birds in, you need to ask these questions, and what time of the year the bird was bred. We're all talking about, putting birds down early in the season. You need to ask the question how old the bird is, because we were only talking earlier, weren't we, Matt, about Facebook nowadays, and seeing these youngsters in the nests in January, February, and it's keen for you to start putting your birds down. It sort of pushes you, but be wary, because some of these birds, especially on the continent, some of these birds was obviously bred January, February the year before.
Yeah.
So they're going to go down early. They're mature. But your birds, what you're brought in or what you're bred, may be second rounders. They might have only been bred in May, June, even possibly July, where they're not going to start breeding in the following year, in January, February.
No, I think that's a really good point, Keith. And we talk a lot about the benefit of Facebook, and it's great. It's great to sort of that social platform to bring the birds to different generations, to a broader audience, which is fantastic. But as you say, it gives that. It can make you rush. I know, speaking from first-hand experience in the canary room, my Norwich went down too early. What did that mean? Well, it meant that I had clear eggs, and the birds, the well-being of the birds is obviously really important, and what we don't want to do is take too many rounds out of the birds. So a wasted round of clear eggs really is just that. It's a wasted round of clear eggs. So the sort of the conditioning in the nests sort of fascinates me, and I've of course, as you say it, it makes absolute perfect sense. The bird is from that good stock in the nest and that development in the nest. And are there specific visual characteristics you're looking for when the young Norwich come out that lets you think, well, that's going to be a good bird, or within your setup, you know, are you anticipating that because of the way that you do things, and obviously you've refined that over, I think, 48 years we talked about before, is that something that happens now as part of practice, or can you still look at birds and think, yeah, that's going to be a really good breeding bird for me?
Well, I mean, the first instance when a bird comes out of the nest, you're looking for type, and that's the main thing, for the type and for showing, really. But you need to keep your eye on your birds before you start letting birds go, which look active, look fit, and especially in the cock birds, because they're obviously going to come into breeding condition. They're the ones that are going to fill the eggs. So you look at where you're going to get your stock from, how they're paired up, and what those youngsters you're going to breed with the following year, and how the line's going to go.
Yeah.
So there's various things when they jump out the nest, what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Continue the family going through, how fit they are, how vigorous they are, which is going to give you ideas for what you're breeding next year. So you're always looking in your own mind what's going to happen the following year.
Yeah.
And keep, improving your bloodline.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things, isn't it? I mean, one of the beauties of this hobby, one of the beauties of the fancy is that sort of that kind of pursuit over many years of excellence, and that, I think for me, what separates the exceptional stock men and stock women from the rest is that continual focus, always sort of thinking ahead, what foundations do I need to put down now so that in 2 or 3 years' time that line, is at its peak, because lines, as we know, will kind of ebb and flow, and different elements, different variations of the line will almost come to a natural end at a stage. So you've always got to make sure you've got something else in the room to keep pushing forward and keep continuing. That's right. I mean, I spoke the last time about me buying purchasing that bird from Adam, that buff cock. And I think I said last year he produced 41 chicks. Well, I was thinking what was going to happen for the following year. So it all worked out to get that line going, get that stud going. I mean, that this year, now I've put him back to his couple of his daughters, and I've also put our brothers and our sisters, to establish that line. Yeah. Now, what I see and what I breed from that this year, if they improve my line, I'll continue doing that. Yeah. Or if there's something missing, then I will bring in a bird to develop that. Whatever's missing. Yeah. But for this year, it's worked out very well, because I've got quite a few half brothers, half sisters. The father, like I say again, we've gone to a couple of daughters. But next year, I know I shall have to bring another bird in to keep the vigour going. Yeah. So it is. It's that constant balance. So we've got our first bit of advice from Keith is looking at the birds from in the nest and as they come out of the nest, and obviously the type and everything else that we're looking for. We'll move on now, Keith, if we may, into the sort of, the feeding and conditioning regime that you do. So we'll take a look at that now. So, Keith, when it comes to, we talked about, the importance of understanding when the birds are bred in terms of preparation for the breeding season, and looking at the vigour as they come out, and obviously looking at the type and the way that the stock wants to to develop over a period of time. From a housing perspective, as we look around the room, you've got this block of fantastic, metal flight fabricated cages in the middle of the room, and you've got cages on the various sides of the room. From a housing perspective with the Norwich, is there anything particular that you do over the sort of end of show season, in the run up to the breeding season?
Well, through the winter months, the Norwich, all the birds go in the flights, so that gives you preparation to clean out, do any refurb to your cages, etc. through the winter months. So all my birds are in the flights. So my flights, you can take the slide out, so it's a double flight, and the hens and cocks will be together through the winter months, but generally I'll put the yellow cocks with the buff ends and vice versa in the other flight.
Yeah.
And then coming up towards the breeding season, I'll probably take the cocks out and put into a double breeder. So you concentrate getting the cocks into condition. And as we all know, that once the cocks are starting to sing nearer the breeding season, that spurs the hens on into breeding season. But through the winter months, in the flights, so you want a good basic diet, good seed, with the Norwich, plenty of canary seed, not too much of the smaller rape, or Niger and stuff like that.
Yeah, so quite a plainish.
Quite plain, and then you can give them a few tidbits through the week. A bit of broccoli to play about in. I like to buy a bag, 20 kilos of wild seed, which I throw on the floor, for instance, because I like to see me Norwich like chickens, scrap about, keep them busy through the winter. Stick the baths on the floor. I have these big pot dishes which I stick the water in, and the birds go in, and they go in every day. Don't matter what the weather's like, they go in the day. And if the birds are bathing, that they're fit.
Yeah.
So it's keeping them busy through the winter months.
So it's an active, keeping them active, and then I guess at that stage that the bath's always a great indicator, isn't it? If a bird doesn't bath, it can be a sign of thinking, there's something not quite right there.
But if most of all your birds are, they bathe each day and they love fresh water.
Yeah.
Once they've had a bath, they don't like going into that water again. So like midday, I'll take the baths out. Next morning, fresh water in the baths, and they'll dive into it. And they're fit, and that's how you keep your birds through the winter. And they're the birds you're going to be breeding with. So later on, end of January, February time, the cocks are going into the double breeders.
Okay. And I mean, the room is beautifully appointed. It's got lots of natural light in it. You've also got the daylight tubes in here as well. I'm assuming they're on timers, and do you start to extend time, or are they on a...
Well, yes, I mean, they are on a timer, and I haven't been using lights. This is my second summer, that's all. Right. I never was a big believer in lights. So for 40 odd years, I would not use lights. But since having them, I've seen a great improvement, especially in the winter months. So you get a real dark, dusky day in the winter. The birds tend to mope about. But I've noticed with these daylight fluorescents, the birds are active, and that's what they want to be. So from there, extending the light, that's what you said, Matt. It's on a timer. I'd extend it from the end of January, 15 minutes each week.
Yeah.
Until you get up to your levels you want.
To your times. And we know when... we've got a little clip here, beautifully filmed by Margaret. I think My Job Is Under Threat, everybody, of you trimming up the birds and preparing the cock birds and the hen birds before you put them into the pairing cages. But that's not not the only preparation, is it? There is, you talked earlier off camera about the sort of the medical side of things, which I know, you know, in the fancy, I mean, we're tinkerers. My wife describes us as tinkerers. You know, the bird fancy, I think, is a fancy that, you know, we're always looking for the next thing that can help our birds and drive them on to the next level. But you've got quite a well-developed approach to the kind of the clean down, if you like.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, 48 years of keeping Norwich and different things we've used over those years. But I do believe it is a good thing to clean your birds out. Because over the years, people have experienced this black spot within the canaries, and hence the word of cleaning your birds out prior to the breeding. I'm not an advocate of having, you know, loads of different medicines, but I think the birds do need cleaning out. And what I use is a couple of broad spectrum antibiotics, Baycox, and the other one I used for this year was the Deoxylin 20%. Now, the reason they're two different ones, so the birds don't get immune to one type of antibiotic. So this year, Deoxylin 20%, and next year will be the Baycox.
Right.
And that's on a period of so many days, is what it recommends. And once you'll give them that, and you only want to do it once a year, you don't want to get these birds used to an antibiotic. And then they, after you gave it to them, then they have another week on a probiotic, which I have used this, which is Prolex C from Aviform. But one I do use, and I haven't got it here at the moment, is a yoghurt, which I mix into the egg food.
You mentioned that earlier, Keith. I got all slightly nervous, you know, given my my physique, and Keith brought out this healthy-looking yogurt, and I was like, Keith, that's surely not for me. But no, it's not. It's Yakult, and Yakult you were mixing in the egg food as part of that
as the probiotic,
bringing them on,
which is does exactly the same as this, which you buy. You spend a fair bit of money on this, but that Yakult does the same thing, and it's a lot cheaper. Yeah. So you just mix that. This you can put in the water, obviously, and they've got a drink, so you know they're going to have it. But that time of the year, if you're giving them a little bit of egg food, they'll eat the egg food as well. So it's just the same thing.
And one of the other things in terms of conditioning, and particularly the cockbirds, is the discussion around wheat germ oil. And is that something that you're using, and how do you I've never used it, I have to say, with any of my birds. Is it part of your...
Well, the wheat germ oil I'd give the cocks only.
Right.
And I usually put a spoonful into conditioned seed and let it soak into the conditioned seed and just give them a finger draw, which I think helps the fertility of the cockbirds.
Right.
And I got this from Fraser, which is from Ireland, and buy that as a litre, and that's how much I use to get the birds in condition through the coming up to the breeding season.
Yeah.
I also, from the same company of Fraser's, I bought this, which is Thrive and Glass, which is a bird conditioner rich in protein and oils. Now I thought I'd just experiment and see what that was like, and it comes in as a crushed different natural herbs and stuff. That's it there, but it's very oily, and I mix that with grated carrot, apple and broccoli. And I found this year, that's the first time I used it, I found this year the birds loved it. And I'm sure that was a great help to bring the birds in condition.
Yeah, part of that discovery. And then from the hen perspective, are you giving anything additionally in the way of calcium? Do you give calcium treatments for them, or is it oyster shell grit?
Well, yeah, I mean, this year I've been a big believer in using plenty of calcium. And the Calcivet.
Yeah.
And because last year I had a bit of a problem coming up into the molt season with one or two of my breeding hens, which I lost one or two. And it could have been lack of calcium. So right through the winter months I've been using Calcivet on a regular basis. So, and they're still on it now. And I would 3 times a week in the water, and 10 ml to a litre. And some people would say that's too much, but if you read the instructions on the recommendations, it's between 10 and 20 ml per litre, especially in the breeding season. I've had no problem with birds, hatching out the egg, and I can see there's been an improvement in the birds this year with the calcium.
Excellent.
Yeah, and the other thing I have done in the past is crush eggshells and put that in the egg food. So yeah, a big believer now in giving them plenty of calcium.
Fabulous. And so I think in terms of the overall conditioning of the birds, Keith, it's a sort of it starts from the nest. So it's sort of 12 months away, and I think for anybody, anyone taking up the hobby, or anyone who's been in the hobby for a huge number of years, I learn every time I do a show, and I've never really considered that until Keith just mentioned it, and I was thinking, that's a really good idea. So I think key really is, Keith, it's about slow and steady, isn't it, with the conditioning of the birds and bringing them into condition. It's not about trying to load them with wheat germs straight away or things, because you can snap them into condition, but then you just have problems.
Yeah, I mean, like the wheat germ oil, I wouldn't be giving the cocks every day.
Yeah.
They're being a finger draw, not too much, and finger draw probably 2 or 3 times a week for the cockbirds.
And so in terms of then, just before we move into part 2 of this episode, which will be, the breeding season, we've talked about the preparation for breeding. In terms of time of year, do you have a sort of a date that you're aiming to sort of each year where you'll start? It's obviously going to be dictated to by the condition of the birds, but do you sort of say, okay, well, March, April, whatever, that's my month, and you're working towards that, or is it very much, it can differ from year to year?
Well, before I had the lights, I would always tell people I'd have my first chicks around the 6th of May. That would be my first chicks at Norwich. Since I've had the lights, thinking I would try to get these birds down earlier, much earlier. Well, it still don't happen with the Norwich. But they're probably youngsters a couple of weeks before that now with these lights. And I'm happy with that. I don't want to be rearing chicks when it's dark out, looking out the window and it's dark. When it comes into spring, you feel like being up here with the birds.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, is part of the hobby. And not to, rush into things. Make sure the birds, they'll tell you when they're ready.
Yeah. Brilliant.
And not push them.
Brilliant. So one of the final challenges, I guess, for every fancier, Keith, when it comes to the preparation for the breeding season, of course, is the thing that we dread, which is mite, and we dread them because we know of the real impact that they can have on the birds and the room and young chicks in the nest. So I can see you've got a couple of things that are familiar to me here and one that isn't. So shall we start with your approach? You know, how far out do you do this at the same time as you're running the Baycocks or the Doxy through them? Is that sort of all part of the same timing? And
well, yeah, I mean, coming up to the breeding season, as I said earlier, you need to clean your birds out to prevent this black spot. I've had black spot in the past, and I don't want it again, so it's precaution rather than cure.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about, and that's the reason I've got the stuff here. So prior to breeding season, it needs to be at least 6 weeks before you pair your birds up to give them any antibiotics, broad spectrum antibiotics to clear the birds out. And then we'll go on to the mite situation. Now, years ago, I mean, when I said, well, I'm talking about when I first started in Norwich 50 years ago, when the old boys like the Wrights and everything, you used to get a bit of the red mite because they used to keep chickens.
yeah,
And the red mite used to come from the chickens. Then, of course, when these old fellas, unfortunately passed on or one thing or another, and us younger ones in them days, we didn't keep chickens and we never used to see red mite. But we used to have northern mite, which you don't see much of now. So there's certain things we used to have for dusting. Dust your birds against northern mite, because they were the mite what used to stay on the bird.
yeah,
And they'd lay the eggs on the bird. And when you see an infestation in the cage, it's where an hen's been sitting and incubating the eggs, and then these mite would explode.
yeah.
And but touch wood somewhere, I've not seen northern mite for years. But what we are seeing nowadays is red mite. It's all come back for some reason.
Yeah.
And where the hell it comes from, I don't know. It could be from pigeons, it could come through the windows, etc. So, luckily I haven't seen it in my bird room for a few years, but I always try to have something to do me birds as a precaution. So for the first thing I do is, and over the years, I've used the front line. And that's just a spray front line for dogs and cats, just a little spray under the wing or on the rump. Now, it's something what don't go into the blood system. It stays as like an oily patch on the bird, and if any mite come, they go onto that patch, pull that in, and that will kill the mite. So that's a precaution. That's what I'm doing over the years. Yeah. Now, the other thing, you can have ivermectin. So I still say that you still got to use ivermectin oral into the bird, because that will kill any parasites within inside the bird. This won't. So where people think that's all you can use and it will get rid of parasites within the bloodstream, it doesn't. It doesn't soak into the bird through the blood system. This year I've used for the first time this S76, which a lot of people, a lot of youngsters who recommend it, and I'm always learning, we're always learning, and I've used that. That's in the water over a period of time with all the instructions on there. So do that way well prior to the breeding, so that gets into the system. In actual fact, you can still do it through the breeding, but once a month, which I haven't done. Like I say, I haven't seen mite in here, so it's totally just for a precaution. And the other thing I've been using over...
This is the thing. I've seen S76, I've seen Frontline, I've used them both. This, however, is new to me.
I first saw this 30 odd years ago when I became very friendly with one of my best friends. I can class him as one of my best friends, Francis Martin from Florida, Orlando. I went into his bird room and I saw him using this. Now this is 7 dust. You only can get it from America. It's cheap as chips. It says on here, kills over 65 different types of insects. So I know it's good stuff, but like everything, you got to know what you're doing with it. I dust the birds prior to breeding. just in case anything's on them, to give them a good dusting in the evening, so they're not flying the dust out of the birds through the daytime. Give them a dust, they roost at night. Anything on those birds it will kill, and it don't affect the birds whatsoever. One thing I also do with this, I would dust the nest when I ring the birds, and only when I ring the birds. I would not put this into the nest with the eggs, because anything, don't matter if it's this or any other powder, those chemicals, and that will seep into the eggshell and kill the embryo. So I wouldn't advise anybody to dust nests and then set eggs. But I always do this when I ring birds 7 or 8 days old. It's never affected a bird whatsoever. Yeah. But I find that's good. We've all had mite in the past, and I've seen this kill mite instantly.
I'll be checking that out online. I'll find it somewhere, I'm sure. Wonderful, Keith, thanks. And, I think in terms of preparation and building the birds up, it's not something that we snap into. It's not something that we can do overnight. As you said earlier, Keith, it's something that starts from the birds in the nest, and that mindset, really, I think for us as breeders, is something that we should really really latch onto. We've got part 2 of this coming up. Part 2 of this is all about the breeding season and breeding Norwich Canaries. You are you're in for a treat. We have some young Norwich here, and Keith is incredibly generous with his information. So I think you find a lot with bird keepers. They don't want to say certain things. Certainly, that's not our experience here. We are in the company of a very, very successful Norwich breeder who's happy to share with us all of his experience. So stay tuned for the next episode. It's coming up very, very soon.
If a chick hatches under a Norwich and not feeding, and I need to put it under a feeder, to make it more natural, I'll put the young chick under the feeder, but also I'll put an eggshell with it. So any eggshells I find in the cages on the floor, I'll pick up. I'll put them in this bowl, and then when I do transfer a youngster under a feeder, what's on pot eggs, I'll put the broken eggshell as well. So it comes natural to her to clean the nest out, and she'll then go on the next stage and feed the youngster.